Pathetic old man, you're done. The words sliced through the laughter like a blade, silencing the clinking of champagne glasses and the jazz band mid-song. Every head in the Palm Springs Country Club turned toward me, the man standing at the center of what was supposed to be my retirement celebration. My daughter-in-law Sabrina stood across the table in her sparkling gold dress, finger pointed at me like a prosecutor. You just can't let go, can you? You're nothing but a bitter, washed-up old man who doesn't know when to quit. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. Then I saw my son Ethan, my only child, my pride for 38 years, laugh. He actually laughed. "She's right, Dad," he said, nodding, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're done. It's time you stopped pretending you matter in the business or the family." The room buzzed with whispers, glasses lowering. A few of my old colleagues from Hayes Financial tried to look away. My former assistant bit her lip. Even the waiter paused mid-step, tray trembling in his hands. I set my glass down the stem, clinking softly against the marble. My reflection stared back from the wine, an old man with silver hair, neat suit, and the kind of face people had started to overlook. I smiled, but it wasn't the polite kind I'd worn for the past hour. It was quieter, colder. Then I said, my voice steady enough to still the air, "Perhaps you should ask your parents to return the $2 million I lent them." The room froze. Sabrina's painted lips parted, color draining from her face. Ethan's laughter died halfway into a nervous cough. Someone at the bar muttered, "$2 million," and the sound echoed like a stone in a well. I didn't wait for a response. I picked up my coat, thanked the band for the music, and walked out beneath the golden chandeliers that no longer looked so bright. Behind me, the noise of murmurs and panic rose. But I didn't turn around. The desert air hit me like clarity. Palm Springs nights were cool this time of year, quiet, forgiving. I stood beside my old black Lincoln for a long moment, watching my breath rise in the dim light of the parking lot. I had imagined this night differently. 40 years at Hayes Financial Consulting, decades of late nights and endless numbers, and they'd honored me with a fine dinner speech's applause. I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt hollow. They called me pathetic. Was I maybe to them? To Sabrina with her luxury handbags and social media friends who thought success came from hashtags. To Ethan, who'd grown comfortable living off the life I'd built. I started the engine. The radio came on a smooth jazz station I used to play when Elaine was still alive. My late wife had loved those evenings after dinner. When I'd loosen my tie, she'd pour us wine, and we'd talk about our plans for Ethan. "He'll have more than we ever did," she'd said once. I had promised her he would. I had kept that promise, maybe too well. Driving through the empty streets, I thought about the years that had led to this. The first job after college, when I made $23,000 a year and thought it was wealth. The nights I worked until dawn, so Ethan could go to private school. The mortgage payments, the small savings that grew into investments, the long climb from junior accountant to CFO. The sacrifices no one had seen. I pulled into the driveway of my modest house on the edge of the desert. No mansion, no fancy gates, just a home with cracked stone tiles, the smell of sage in the air, and silence thick enough to hear your own thoughts. Inside, the clock ticked steadily in the dark living room. I hung up my jacket, poured myself a small drink, and sat by the window. The anger didn't come right away. First came the disbelief, then the ache, the kind that starts behind your ribs and grows until it fills every quiet space. I had raised that boy alone after Elaine died. I had spent nights helping him with math weekends, coaching his baseball games, years covering his tuition and his first business loan. I had never asked for repayment, only respect. Somewhere along the way, respect had turned into pity, then into ridicule. The phone buzzed. A message from Nora Levine, my oldest friend and former colleague. Saw the clip from the party. You okay? Of course someone had recorded it. Everything was content now. I typed back, fine. Just another reminder that people mistake silence for weakness. She replied within seconds. You were never weak, Frank. Just patient. Call me tomorrow. We need to talk. I stared at her message for a while, the word patient lingering in my mind. Patience. That had been my greatest strength in finance and in life. I'd built everything quietly, savings, respect, control. And patience was what had kept me alive after losing Elaine. What had made me endure watching Ethan grow distant as Sabrina sank her claws into him. I leaned back, eyes closing. Pathetic old man, I whispered. The phrase no longer stung. It sounded almost amusing now. They had no idea who they were talking to. They thought retirement meant I was finished, that age meant irrelevance. They didn't know what 40 years of precision and numbers had taught me everything leaves a trail. I rose, went to the cabinet by my desk, and unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside neatly labeled folders, property deeds, tax records, investment statements. My entire life compressed into paper. I pulled out one particular file, the one marked Monroe Trust Holdings. I flipped through the pages, each stamped notarized silent witnesses to what they didn't know. Stocks, real estate, a network of companies built over decades, discreetly tucked behind shell entities. And at the heart of it, a ledger documenting a private loan to Richard and Margaret Whitman, Sabrina's parents. $2 million signed, sealed, and quietly forgotten by everyone. Except me. The numbers didn't lie. They never did. I closed the folder carefully, the soft click of the drawer sounding like a gun being reloaded. Maybe it was. Outside, the desert wind howled softly, rattling the window pane. The night smelled of rain and dust. I stood there for a long time, watching the reflection of my own face in the glass-lined, aged, but far from defeated. They thought the story ended tonight. They thought calling me pathetic made me smaller. But in finance, endings are just closing balances before the next fiscal year begins. I turned off the lights, the glow of the street lamps cutting thin silver lines across the floor. Tomorrow I would make a few calls, quiet ones, the kind that changed everything without a single headline. Tomorrow they would remember who I was, and this time I wouldn't let them forget. The morning light cut through the blinds, sharp and clean, landing across the ledger, still open on my desk. I hadn't slept. The words from last night replayed like a record stuck in one groove. Pathetic old man, you're done. I poured coffee, black and bitter, and sat down in the silence that now filled my house like a second skin. The kind of silence that didn't comfort you, just reminded you how empty things had become. I stared out the window at the desert horizon. There's a strange peace out here. The stillness before the heat takes over, when everything looks calm but hides a quiet, ruthless energy underneath. That was me. Still on the surface, calculating underneath. People think retirement means surrender. They forget it can also mean freedom. No board meetings, no quarterly reports, no investors to please. Just time. Time to plan. My hands moved almost automatically, sorting through old papers, organizing files that no one but me could decode. There was a rhythm to it, paper folder lock. Decades of order, decades of control. Elaine used to tease me for it. You organize your socks by fiscal quarter, she'd say, laughing. I could still hear that laugh, soft and easy. She'd been my balance, the part of me that believed kindness could fix things. When she died, the balance left too. I raised Ethan on a schedule structure was all I had to offer. It worked at least for a while. I still remember the first time I brought him to my office, maybe 10 years old, curious and sharp. I showed him how numbers always told the truth if you looked long enough. He loved it. Said he wanted to be like me. Somewhere along the line that admiration turned into resentment. When Elaine died, I made him a promise that he'd never have to struggle like we did starting out. I worked 16-hour days, took on clients other people refused, handled portfolios for families that measured loyalty by the size of their yachts. The hours, the pressure, it all paid off. By the time Ethan graduated college, he had everything. I didn't security connections, a name that opened doors. And maybe that was my mistake. Maybe I gave him too much. The phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Nora Coffey at our spot, 10 a.m. My treat? I smiled. Nora Levine had been there since the beginning, colleague, confidant, occasional devil's advocate. If Elaine was my heart, Nora was the sharpness that kept me alive in business. At precisely 10, I walked into the Copper Mug, the small cafe where we'd been meeting for nearly 20 years. Same waitress, same scratched counter, same faint smell of cinnamon and espresso. Nora sat at our corner table, gray hair pulled back, glasses perched on her nose, a stack of legal documents next to her coffee cup. "Well," she said, eyeing me over the rim of her mug, "if it isn't Palm Springs' latest viral sensation." I sat down. "You saw the video. Half the city saw the video." Her tone was light, but her eyes were serious. "You handled it better than most would. Didn't throw a drink. Didn't raise your voice. That smile at the end, it scared people." I stirred my coffee. Fear wasn't the goal. Understanding was. Nora leaned forward. "And what do you want them to understand? That I'm not finished?" She smiled faintly. "You never were. Just invisible. That's the advantage of getting old. Frank people stop paying attention. Makes it easier to work." I looked at her. "You sound like you're volunteering." She shrugged. "Depends on what you're planning. I'm not planning anything illegal." "Of course not," she said dryly. "Your kind of revenge comes with a spreadsheet and a signature." I didn't deny it. "They called me useless," I said quietly. "My own son. I think it's time they remembered who taught them everything they know about money." Nora's eyes softened. "You're not doing this for pride, are you?" "Pride," I shook my head. "No, for respect." She reached across the table and touched my hand briefly. "Then make them earn it." Back home, the silence felt different. Not lonely this time, just deliberate. Controlled. I walked through each room slowly, as though reacquainting myself with a house I'd lived in for decades but never truly seen. Everything was neat, functional. The furniture was older, worn, but solid. Ethan used to tell me to sell the place and move into a modern condo closer to the city. I never did. I didn't need modern. I needed familiar. In the corner of the living room sat the old oak desk where I'd done my first freelance accounting jobs back in the 70s. The surface still bore faint marks of ink and cigarette burns from long nights. I sat there now and opened my laptop. Files and folders populated the screen, personal investments, dormant accounts, shell corporations. To most, it would look like chaos. To me, it was precision disguised as dust. I opened one particular file, Hayes and Monroe Holdings. A relic from my early career when I'd quietly set up small equity shares in logistics and tech startups no one believed in. 2 of them had exploded in value over the years. I'd let the dividends roll into anonymous trust accounts, building layer upon layer of legal protection. When Ethan started his own consulting firm, I let him think I was just scraping by. I didn't want him relying on my safety net. I wanted him to earn his own success. Instead, he married into money, or what he thought was money. The Whitmans were rich on the outside and crumbling inside. I knew their type. I'd audited hundreds of families like them. Big houses, bigger debt. And 3 years ago, when their empire began to crack, they came to me. Quietly. Desperate. The knock on my door that night had been polite, but the fear behind it wasn't. Richard and Margaret Whitman sat in my living room, pretending not to notice the modest furniture or the old car in the driveway. Just a temporary situation, Richard had said. We'll pay you back with interest. They'd paid 6 installments. Then nothing. Now their daughter had called me pathetic. I scrolled through my investment logs, the $1,000 loan sitting there like a dormant volcano. A small smile tugged at my mouth. Numbers don't hold grudges, they just wait. The doorbell rang. When I opened it, a delivery man stood there holding a box of pastries. From Mrs. Whitman, he said, handing me a note taped to the lid. It read, "Franklin, we hope we can talk soon. Sabrina was out of line last night. Please don't hold it against her. We're all family after all." I set the box on the counter unopened. Family. Convenient word always trotted out when people needed forgiveness or money. I poured another cup of coffee instead. That evening, Nora called. "You should see this," she said, and sent a link. A local business blog had picked up the story. Former CFO, humiliated at retirement party. Son daughter-in-law caught on video. The comments section was brutal, half pity, half gossip. "Public opinion's on your side," Nora said. "Use it." "I don't need pity," I replied. "Then what do you need?" I looked again at the article, the freeze-frame photo of me standing there, half lit by chandeliers, coat in hand, just before walking out. My expression was unreadable, even to myself. "I need them to see who I really am." "Then stop hiding," she said simply. "You've spent your whole life behind other people's balance sheets. Maybe it's time you balanced your own." After the call, I walked out into the backyard. The desert sky was dark blue, the stars cutting sharp and clear. The air smelled of sage and electricity, the calm before a storm. I thought about Elaine again, about how she'd always said I could make anything grow, if I just had the patience to plant it right. Maybe revenge was the same. You plant it deep, water it with silence, and let time do the rest. Inside, I turned off every light except the one above my desk. Papers spread across the surface like a map. In the middle, the folder labeled Monroe Fund, the seed that had grown into my hidden empire. They thought I was finished. But the truth was, retirement had simply freed me from distractions. Tomorrow, I'd meet Nora again. And Marcus Lang, the young financial advisor I'd once mentored, would get a call. It was time to take everything I'd learned over 40 years and apply it to a new kind of project. Not a company, a reckoning. The desert sun crept through the blinds, slicing thin gold lines across my desk. I'd been awake since 4, staring at the ledger open in front of me. The numbers weren't the problem. They never were. What kept me up wasn't uncertainty. It was clarity. Everything I needed to destroy the illusion my son and his wife had built was already in my hands. I brewed coffee, the kind strong enough to strip paint, and sat in my office. 40 years of habit. Think before you move before they expect. I clicked open the folder on my laptop marked Monroe Trust Holdings. Every transaction I'd made for the last 2 decades sat there quiet, obedient, untouched. The screen glowed faintly in the morning light, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: control. Back in the late 90s, when most people were chasing .com miracles, I was buying up what they ignored: freight logistics, warehousing, industrial land. Everyone wanted fast profits. I wanted permanence. While they bragged about IPOs, I built something quiet, a shadow portfolio. It started with $80,000 of savings and a few cautious deals. 2 decades later, that little seed had become an empire, buried under 3 layers of corporate shells: Hayes, Consulting LLC, Monroe Trust, Holdings, and Seaside Ventures. On paper, they were separate entities, invisible to each other. In reality, they were me. No one knew. Not Ethan, not the Whitmans, not even Nora, though she'd always suspected I had a backup plan. I told myself I'd kept it secret to protect my family. The truth was uglier. I'd kept it hidden because I wanted to see how long it would take before they tried to take something from me. The answer had arrived. I opened another file, the $2,000 loan to Richard and Margaret Whitman. Dated, notarized, perfectly legal. The interest compounded quietly in the background while they hosted cocktail parties and bought new cars. They'd made 6 payments, then vanished into polite silence. I'd let it slide the way a parent forgives a child's lie until last week. Now it was time to turn that forgiveness into leverage. The phone rang at precisely 9:00 a.m. Mr. Hayes came, a familiar voice. Marcus Lang. I wasn't sure you'd still have my number. I never lose anything worth keeping, I said. How's Los Angeles treating you? He chuckled. Better than New York did. Fewer sharks, more smiles. Same danger. Marcus had been one of my brightest protégés, a junior analyst barely out of grad school when I hired him 15 years ago. I'd taught him everything I knew about reading people through their portfolios. He'd gone on to manage money for the city's elite. Smart, careful, loyal at least to me. Marcus, I said, I need to move some things. Quietly, there was a pause then, that old tone of cautious curiosity. How quiet are we talking? Quiet enough that the Whitmans never see it coming? He whistled low. That bad, huh? They made it personal. When do you want to meet today? 11. Your office. Marcus's firm occupied a high floor in a glass tower downtown. Polished floors, quiet assistants, the faint smell of expensive coffee. The kind of place where everyone pretended to be calm because the numbers made them gods. He greeted me with a firm handshake. You look good, Mr. Hayes. Retirement suits you. I'm not retired, I said. I'm just unburdened. We stepped into his private office, all glass and steel, the city stretching below us. I handed him a folder. These, I said, are my assets. He flipped through the papers, eyes widening slightly. Jesus, Frank. This is significant. I thought you'd sold most of your holdings. I let people think that. He gave me a half smile. Of course you did. I sat down, folding my hands. I need you to restructure these into secured legal holdings. Quietly. No new entities under my name. Keep everything layered exactly as it is, but make it untouchable. He nodded slowly, scanning the figures. Are you expecting litigation? Not yet, I said. But I'm expecting stupidity, and I want to be ready when it arrives. He leaned back in his chair. Let me guess, the Whitmans. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Marcus rubbed his jaw. You helped them once, didn't you? I looked out the window. 3 years ago, their car dealership chain was about to go under. They came to me, begged for a private loan. $2 million, 5% interest, 7-year repayment schedule. They called it a bridge loan. And they stopped paying. Stopped pretending, more like. Marcus gave a low whistle. That's bold, considering they're married into your family. They're counting on that. He studied me carefully. You're not going to sue them. Not yet, anyway. No, I'll let the debt speak for itself. He grinned the way only someone fluent in financial warfare can. You're going to pull a silent margin call. Something like that. I handed him another envelope, thinner sealed. Inside is every transaction they've made for the past 18 months. Get me a full forensic report. I want to know where every dollar went. Marcus raised an eyebrow. How'd you get this old habits? He chuckled. You really are something, Mr. Hayes. Most men your age are playing golf. Golf's for people who like losing slowly. He laughed. Give me 48 hours. I'll find their soft spots. I nodded. And Marcus, yeah, keep my name out of everything. Not even your assistants know I was here. He smiled. You taught me that rule. When I got home, the air felt lighter. For the first time in weeks, my mind was clear, my direction set. I poured myself a drink and stood by the window watching the afternoon light turn the desert gold. On the table sat the unopened box of pastries Margaret Whitman had sent 2 days ago. I lifted the lid, stared at the perfect little tarts, and tossed the whole thing in the trash. There was a knock at the door. A courier handed me a thick envelope, legal stationery. I opened it slowly. Inside was a letter from a law firm in Beverly Hills. Polite language, formal concern. Our clients, Mr. and Mrs. Richard Whitman, have requested clarification regarding the terms of the prior loan arrangement. In particular, they question the mental capacity under which said loan was made. I laughed. Not loud, not bitter, just once quietly. Of course. They were moving first, trying to paint me as senile, unfit, delusional. They thought age made me defenseless. They thought wrong. I took a pen and wrote one sentence on the letter before slipping it into a fresh envelope. Capacity, like money, is proven through results. Then I signed my name and sealed it. That night, I sat in the living room, the house lit only by the soft glow of the desk lamp. The folders lay spread open like chess pieces, each a move waiting to happen. My hand hovered over one marked Personal Affairs, Hayes and Monroe Legacy Fund. Elaine's photo sat beside it. I lifted it, brushed the dust from the frame. "You'd tell me to let it go," I said softly. "But you were always better at mercy than math." I set the photo down and picked up my pen. Tomorrow I'd meet Marcus again. After that I'd call Nora and have her start drafting the first phase of my counter. This wasn't anger anymore. It was arithmetic. They'd built their lives on illusions, luxury cars, charity galas, social prestige, all funded by my generosity. Now the illusion would end. I closed the laptop, the screen going black, reflecting only my own face back at me. For the first time in years, I liked what I saw. The world thought I was retired. They'd forgotten a man who spent his life counting other people's money, never truly stops counting. And I was just getting started. The next morning, the sky over Palm Springs was a pale wash of silver promising heat later, but holding a strange cool calm for now. I was already dressed, gray slacks, blue shirt sleeves rolled up. The folder Marcus had prepared sat waiting on my kitchen counter like a sealed confession. 48 hours. That's all it had taken him. The phone buzzed at exactly 9. "Marcus," I said, picking up. "You might want to sit down for this, Mr. Hayes. I'm standing just fine." He gave a short laugh, then his voice lowered. "You were right. The Whitmans are worse off than you thought." The car dealerships, they've been propping them up with shell loans from personal credit. 2 of their showrooms are mortgaged twice over. The payments they missed with you, that money went straight into Sabrina's company. I didn't move. Glow House Interiors. Exactly. She's been using her parents' capital to fund her lifestyle business. Nothing profitable. Designer furniture, social media marketing, photo shoots in Malibu. All on borrowed money. I let the words sink in, then said quietly, "How bad is it?" "They've been defaulting for months. Their credit rating's tanking. They'll fold before summer." "Good. Do you want me to freeze assets?" "Not yet," I said. "Let them feel the tremor before the collapse." Marcus hesitated. "You're playing this like a market short." "I'm not playing," I said. "I'm correcting." At 11, I drove to Nora's law office in downtown Palm Desert. The building was modest old Spanish architecture with white stucco walls and red tile roof. Nora herself was waiting in her glass-walled conference room. Sleeves rolled up, glasses perched low on her nose, a stack of files already open. "Sit," she said, sliding a document toward me. "You're going to like this." The title page read, "Notice of Default and Demand for Payment. Loan Agreement between Franklin Hayes and Richard and Margaret Whitman." Her pen tapped the top line. Legally sound, airtight, enforceable. You followed every regulation when you made that loan. Their argument about mental capacity, dead on arrival. I also found something else. Richard filed a preliminary probate inquiry 6 months ago. My head tilted. Probate? She nodded. He wanted to know what happens if a creditor is declared mentally incompetent. They were laying groundwork to claim you weren't fit to make the loan. I laughed once, low and humorless. They wanted to steal from me and erase the evidence. Exactly, Nora said. I've already requested certified statements from your physician and CPA. You're in better health than half the clients I see. Send them everything I said. Let them choke on documentation. Nora leaned back. You sure you want to push it this far, Frank? Once this notice goes out, there's no going back. There never was, I replied. She studied me for a long moment, then signed her name with a flourish. Then, let's make it official. I watched her stamp the envelope. That sound, the heavy click of the notary seal, was cleaner than any applause I'd ever received. That evening, I went for a walk through the neighborhood. The desert light had turned golden, the kind that makes even cracked pavement look beautiful. The world looked quiet, unaware that lives were shifting beneath its calm surface. When I returned home, I found a message waiting on my phone. Ethan. Dad, we need to talk. Fallon's parents are upset. They said you're threatening legal action over something that isn't true. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Call me before this gets out of hand. Misunderstanding. The word always made me smile. People used it when they meant we got caught. I poured a drink, read the message again, and deleted it. The next call would come soon enough. It came sooner than expected. The following afternoon, the phone rang again. I recognized the number before I answered. Mr. Hayes, this is Margaret Whitman. Her voice was calm, almost maternal, the same tone she'd used the night she came begging for the loan. We received something from your lawyer today. Surely there's no need to escalate this. Escalate, I repeated softly. Margaret, it's been 3 years. You stopped paying. You ignored every reminder. I'd say escalation is overdue. She sighed. We were under financial strain. You of all people should understand business cycles. Business cycles don't excuse deceit. Franklin, please. You're part of our family now. We can find a way to resolve this privately. That's what you said last time. Her voice sharpened. If you insist on going public, it will hurt everyone, including Ethan and Sabrina. They had nothing to do with this. I almost laughed. Your daughter insulted me in front of 100 people. My son joined her. They're not innocent, they're participants. Silence. Then a softer tone. We never meant to disrespect you. Of course not, I said. You just meant to exploit me quietly. She inhaled sharply. You'll regret this, Franklin. Possibly, I said, and hung up. That night, I sat at my desk reviewing the final draft Marcus had sent over Whitman Group, financial summary and asset allocation. Page after page of collapsing debt, unpaid invoices, deferred taxes. The kind of numbers that made accountants sweat. I highlighted the relevant sections, forwarded them to Nora, and attached one short line. Execute the filing tomorrow. The message sent with a satisfying click. I leaned back, feeling something between calm and vindication. For years, I'd lived beneath the surface of my own success, content to let others think I'd grown old and harmless. That illusion had protected me. But illusions cut both ways. Theirs was built on image, mine on calculation. Now both were about to collide. The quiet house hummed with the refrigerator's low buzz. Somewhere outside, a coyote called. The desert had a way of teaching survival through silence. I poured myself another drink, then heard the crunch of tires outside. Headlights swept across my driveway. A moment later, there was knocking at the door. When I opened it, Ethan stood there pale and sweating under the porch light. "Dad," he said, breathless. "What are you doing?" "Sabrina's parents are panicking. They said you're threatening to ruin them." "I'm asking for repayment," I said evenly. "Nothing more. They're saying you're unstable, that you're trying to destroy our family." I stepped aside. "Come in." He hesitated, then walked in, glancing around the house like he hadn't really looked at it in years. His eyes landed on the folders spread across my desk. "You've been digging into them, just reviewing facts," I said. "Something I thought you, as a consultant, might appreciate." "Dad, this isn't about business," he said, voice rising. "This is about pride. You're angry about what happened at the party. We were drunk, people said things they didn't mean. You meant every word I said quietly." Ethan's jaw tightened. "They're my in-laws, my wife's parents. Can't you find some compassion?" "Compassion," I repeated. "They tried to have me declared mentally incompetent, Ethan. They filed inquiries with probate court." "Do you know what that means?" He blinked. That can't be true. It's documented," I said. "Ask your wife." He shook his head, voice trembling. "Dad, you're twisting this." "I'm clarifying it." We stared at each other across the small living room, the distance between us feeling like years. He broke the silence first. "I don't know who you are anymore." "You'll remember soon enough," I said. He turned toward the door. "This will destroy us." "No," I said. "It will reveal you." He left without another word. The sound of his car engine faded into the night. When the house fell silent again, I looked down at my hands. They were steady. That surprised me. Outside, the desert wind picked up, rattling the windows. I could almost hear Elaine's voice again, soft but firm. "Don't let bitterness become your legacy." I exhaled slowly. "Not bitterness," I said aloud. "Correction." The clock ticked toward midnight. Tomorrow the legal notice would go public, and the people who'd mistaken silence for weakness would finally learn the cost of confusing patience with surrender. The first headline appeared 3 days later. Whitman Group under financial review. Creditors demand accountability. It was a small article buried halfway through the Palm Springs Business Weekly, but by noon it had already made its way around every country club dining table and golf course in the valley. I sat on my porch, newspaper in hand, sunlight slanting across the wooden boards. The smell of burnt coffee drifted from the kitchen. They'd tried to bury me with humiliation. I was returning the favor with documentation. By afternoon, my phone began to buzz first. Nora, then Marcus. "They've started calling around," Marcus said, "trying to stall. Their lawyers reached out to the bank, but it's too late. The freeze went through this morning." "How long until it hits the press again?" I asked. "Couple of days at most. You'll have front-page vindication by the weekend." "Good," I said. People forget headlines faster than they forget humiliation. Let's give them something permanent. Nora's call came next. "They're furious, Frank," she said. "Margaret tried to accuse you of coercion, said you manipulated them into signing the loan. I sent her copies of every payment receipt. Then I sent the time-stamped emails. Silence ever since." I smiled faintly. Paper beats panic every time. "What's next?" "Next," I said, "we make sure they can't crawl out of it." That night I worked by lamplight. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. On the desk, a dozen folders lay open each. A piece of a puzzle I'd spent years constructing: investments, real estate holdings, partnership, agreements. I wasn't just cutting them off. I was rerouting the current. 3 of Ethan's biggest clients, Rutherford Engineering, Breyer Logistics, and Crown Pacific Holdings, had come through me. I'd introduced him to their executives, vouched for his firm, even reviewed his early reports before signing off. Without those contracts, his company would collapse in a matter of months. I drafted 3 short emails. Gentlemen, effective immediately, I'll be resuming personal oversight of your portfolio management. Please consider your current contracts with Hayes Consulting terminated. My office will handle the transition discreetly. 3 clicks. 3 quiet detonations. I leaned back, rubbing my eyes. Revenge wasn't loud. It was methodical. Every keystroke a scalpel, not a sword. The next morning, Ethan called. I let it ring twice before answering. "Dad, what the hell did you do?" His voice cracked, half anger, half fear. "I did what any responsible investor does," I said. "I moved my assets where they'll be handled properly. You just cost me 3 major clients." "Do you realize what that does to my company?" "I do," I said evenly. "It corrects a mistake. This isn't business anymore. It's personal." "No, Ethan," I said, staring out the window at the line of desert hills glowing in the morning light. "It became personal the moment you stood there and laughed at me." He was quiet for a beat. "You can't punish Mom for being gone by punishing me." My throat tightened, but my voice stayed calm. "Don't make this about your mother. You did this yourself. You're destroying everything I built. I built it, I said. You borrowed it." He swore under his breath. "Sabrina's parents are talking about filing bankruptcy protection. If they go down, we all do. Do you even care what happens to me?" I hesitated. "I care enough to let you learn what happens when you mistake comfort for strength." He started to say something, then stopped. The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, heart heavy but steady. The truth was cruel but necessary. Sometimes the only way to teach someone the value of something was to take it away. At noon, Nora stopped by the house. She carried a folder thicker than usual. "I took the liberty of preparing something extra," she said, setting it on the table. "A full motion to enforce repayment with interest and penalties. Total owed $2,843,712. I raised an eyebrow. "Exact as ever." She smiled. "You trained me. What's your recommendation?" "Give them 30 days. It looks generous. After that, the court gets involved." "Do it," I said. She nodded, but her eyes lingered on me. "Frank, I've known you a long time. You've always been deliberate, never cruel. Just make sure this isn't about proving something." "It's not," I said. "It's about closing the books." She studied me for a second longer, then sighed. "Just don't close yourself with them." After she left, I sat for a while staring at the papers. Outside, the sun blazed over the ridge. My reflection in the window looked tired but focused. Nora was wrong. It wasn't cruelty. It was balance. The same principle that governed every account ledger and every moral equation. Debits and credits, actions and consequences. By Thursday, the ripple had spread. Sabrina's boutique closed its doors. A temporarily suspended operations sign hung crooked in the window of her downtown showroom. On social media, she posted something vague about restructuring and family challenges. The comments beneath were merciless. Richard and Margaret's car dealerships stopped advertising that weekend. Rumor had it they'd fired half their staff. Ethan didn't call again. But that night, while I was making dinner, I saw a car stop in front of my house. Through the blinds, I caught a glimpse of Sabrina in the driver's seat. She didn't get out. Just sat there for a few minutes, face pale in the dashboard glow before driving away. I didn't follow. Whatever guilt or desperation had brought her here, she wasn't ready to speak yet. Friday morning, Marcus called again. "Frank, you'll want to hear this," he said. "The banks pulled the Whitmans' line of credit. Their cash reserves are gone. How long before they default completely?" "Maybe a week. Then we wait," I said. "You really are enjoying this, aren't you?" Marcus teased. "Enjoying," I repeated, staring at the neat rows of paper on my desk. "No. I'm remembering." remembering that silence can be the loudest answer. That night I walked outside just before sunset. The desert wind carried the faint scent of creosote and rain. The horizon burned orange and purple, a reminder that endings can be beautiful if you stand far enough back. For months, they'd treated me like an old man too soft to matter. But here I was, steady, precise, untouchable. Age didn't weaken me. It stripped away everything unnecessary, leaving only the blade. I poured a small glass of bourbon and sat on the porch, watching the first stars appear. When I closed my eyes, I could almost see Elaine beside me again. I could hear her say what she always said when I overthought everything. Don't let numbers replace people, Frank. I opened my eyes. The wind rustled the papers on my lap. Somewhere out there, my son was watching his world crumble. Somewhere, a family who once mocked me was realizing their wealth had been an illusion. And here in the quiet of my modest porch, I felt no triumph, only certainty. This was never about revenge. It was about restoring truth to its proper value. Still, as the night deepened and the bourbon warmed my throat, a part of me wondered how much truth a man could restore before it started to cost him something else. The stars came out one by one, steady and cold above the desert, and I whispered to the wind, "Correction complete." But even as I said it, I knew the ledger wasn't closed yet. Not while my son still carried my name and my disappointment. Dinner at my place I'd texted that morning. Just the three of us. 7 p.m. There are things we need to clear up. No emoji, no explanations. I knew they'd come. Guilt, fear, curiosity, they all pulled harder than affection ever did. By 6:30, the house smelled of roast chicken rosemary and the faint citrus of the cleaner I'd used on every surface. The table was set with quiet precision, white plates, folded linen napkins, a single candle flickering at the center. A bottle of Pinot Noir waited unopened beside 3 glasses. The folder of documents lay on the sideboard, invisible from their seats, but close enough for me to reach. I stood by the window, watching the desert twilight stretch itself thin. The silence before a reckoning always had a sound of its own, like breath held too long. At 7 sharp, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Sabrina stood there in a red dress too expensive for her current finances. Makeup carefully layered over sleeplessness. Ethan hovered behind her, pale, his tie crooked. "Dad," he said, forcing a smile. "You look good." "I've been better," I said. "Come in." They stepped inside. Sabrina's eyes darted around the room, scanning the old furniture, the framed photo of Elaine on the mantel, the faint smell of polish. She was looking for weakness, for evidence of poverty, of smallness. I let her look. We sat. I poured the wine. Sabrina cleared her throat. "We appreciate the invitation. I think it's time we put all this unpleasantness behind us." "Unpleasantness," I repeated softly. "That's one word for it." Ethan reached for his glass. "Dad, I know things were said at the party. You were humiliated, and I raised a hand. "This isn't about the party." Sabrina's lips tightened. "Then what is it about?" I leaned back. "Honesty." She let out a short laugh. "That's rich, coming from someone who's been hiding money for decades." Ethan flinched. "Sabrina." "It's fine," I said. "You want honesty? Let's start there." I picked up my phone, tapped once, and set it on the table. A recording filled the room, the clinking of glasses, the laughter. Sabrina's voice cutting through the music. "You're a pathetic old man. You're done." Then Ethan's voice, flat and careless. "She's right, Dad. You're useless." The sound filled the small dining room, bouncing off the walls like ghosts returning home. When it ended, there was only the low hum of the refrigerator and Sabrina's uneven breathing. "You recorded us," she whispered. "Numbers aren't the only things worth keeping accurate," I said. I thought we should all remember the tone of that evening before we discuss anything else. Ethan's face reddened. Dad, we were drunk. No, you were honest, I said quietly. Drunkenness just stripped away the mask. Sabrina crossed her arms. So what, you want revenge? You've already humiliated my parents. You've taken Ethan's clients. What more could you possibly need, Clarity? I said. You've all been operating under a false assumption that I'm weak, confused, finished. Tonight I'm here to correct that. I rose, walked to the sideboard, and took out the folder. The candlelight caught the gold edge of the notary stamp. I set it down between us. Ethan frowned. What's that loan documents? The ones your in-laws signed 3 years ago. Sabrina went pale. That's impossible. Impossible, I said, would be you paying back what you owe. I flipped the folder open, the pages crisp and deliberate. $2 million at 5% interest. As of last week, the total balance stands at $2,437,612. Signed by Richard and Margaret Whitman, witnessed and notarized. Legal binding and very, very real. She reached for the papers, but her hand stopped halfway. You forged this. I smiled. You should know better than to accuse an accountant of bad math. Ethan's voice broke through. Dad, why didn't you tell us? Why not say something before all this? Because I said you didn't ask, and because I wanted to see who you'd become without my help. He sank back into his chair, staring at the tablecloth as if the numbers themselves were written there. Sabrina found her voice again. Even if that's true, my parents thought it was an investment. It was a loan I cut in. I have every wire transfer, every receipt. Would you like to see them? She shook her head, trembling now. I leaned forward. You called me pathetic, Sabrina. You mocked my car, my house, my life. But every dollar that's kept your world spinning came from me. Your wedding, your house, your boutique, all built on borrowed money. On my generosity. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back, jaw clenched. Ethan finally spoke, voice low. Dad, we can fix this. Just don't do anything rash. Let me talk to them. You'll have 30 days, I said. After that, Nora files in court. The debt becomes public record. He looked up sharply. You'd really drag family through court? I met his eyes. They dragged me through humiliation. We're just evening the scales. Sabrina pushed her chair back abruptly. You're cruel. No, I said. I'm precise. She stood shaking. We're leaving. Not yet. They froze. I took another folder from the sideboard and slid it across the table. Ethan hesitated before opening it. His eyes moved down the first page, confusion dawning into disbelief. What is this? He whispered. Your business? I said. The credit line you used to fund Hayes Consulting. I co-signed it 15 years ago. Without my signature, that loan doesn't exist. I withdrew it this morning. Sabrina gasped. Ethan looked at me like he'd never seen me before. Dad, you can't. I can, I said. And I did. The candle flame flickered in the silence that followed. You wanted independence, I said softly. Now you have it. You'll stand on your own, just like you said I couldn't. Sabrina sank back into her chair, whispering, This will ruin us. Correction, I said. It will define you. For a moment, no one spoke. Ethan stared at the table. The wine untouched, his hands trembling slightly. Then, almost inaudibly, he said, Mom would hate this. I nodded. She would. But she'd hate what you became even more. He flinched like I'd struck him. I stood collecting the folders. Dinner's over. Sabrina rose unsteadily. Franklin, please don't, I said. You've had your say. Now it's my turn. They moved toward the door in silence. At the threshold, Ethan turned back. "You think this makes you strong? But it just proves you're alone." "Alone," I said, "is where strength lives." The door closed behind them. I stayed at the table for a long time after they left, staring at the wine glasses still half full, the untouched food cooling on the plates. The candle burned down to a stub wax, spilling over like melted time. Somewhere outside, I heard their car start the engine revving too hard, then fading into the distance. I poured the wine into my glass and took a slow sip. It tasted sharp, almost metallic. The kind of taste that lingered. For the first time in months, I felt no anger. Only the steady calm that comes after an equation finally balances. I looked at the note I'd written earlier, folded neatly beside the plate. Phase 2. Withdraw support. Let them fall on their own weight. The night settled around the house like a closed ledger. They had taken my dignity once. Now, I had taken back the narrative. And tomorrow, the real reckoning would begin. The morning after the dinner, the desert air carried that strange stillness that comes before a storm. The house smelled faintly of last night's rosemary and wine. The plates were gone, but the echo of their voices lingered in the walls. I stood by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the first light creep over the sand. My reflection in the glass looked older, but steadier. They'd left angry. They always did. People like Ethan and Sabrina didn't understand silence. They mistook it for weakness. That had been their mistake for years. Today they'd learn what silence really was: a warning. I opened my notebook and drew a single line under the words I'd written the night before, Phase 2. Remove leverage. By 8 o'clock, I was in Los Angeles, the familiar smell of polished wood and coffee filling the lobby of Lang & Associates Investment Group. Marcus's assistant led me into his office, a glass cube floating above the city. Marcus greeted me with his usual grin. "You look like a man who's already won." "I haven't won," I said, sitting down. "I've just stopped losing." He slid a folder across the desk. "You wanted updates. Here's everything." Inside were statements, loan agreements, and credit lines, all tied to Ethan's company, Hayes Consulting LLC. The numbers glared back at me, $750,000 in business credit secured by my name. My signature. My guarantee. "Without your backing," Marcus said, "the bank will need new collateral. And Ethan's company doesn't qualify." I closed the folder. "Then pull it." He blinked. "You're sure?" "Yes, this will sink his firm within 60 days. Then it'll be the most honest 60 days he's ever lived." Marcus leaned back, studying me. "You don't even raise your voice, but I swear you're the scariest man I've met." "Scary isn't my goal," I said. "Finality is." He laughed softly. "All right. I'll process it today. The bank will notify him by end of week." "Good," I said. "Let's move on to the clients." That afternoon, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to Rutherford Engineering. Charles said, my voice calm, polite. "I'll be handling your accounts personally again." There was a pause on the other end, then relief. "Honestly, Frank, we've missed your touch. Ethan's team hasn't been as responsive. I'll make sure that changes." The second call was to Breyer Logistics. The CEO didn't even hesitate. "Of course, Mr. Hayes. We'll terminate our contract with your son's firm and move everything back under your advisement." The third was Crown Pacific Holdings. They hesitated the most, but once I mentioned the phrase audit inconsistency, they folded like damp paper. By the time I hung up, Ethan's firm had lost 60% of its revenue. I didn't gloat. There was no satisfaction, just a strange, quiet efficiency, like finishing a task that had been waiting too long. I forwarded all documentation to Marcus. One sentence in the email: close all ties with Hayes Consulting. Effective immediately. At 3, I met Nora in her office. She already had the next set of papers waiting. Demand for immediate repayment, she said, tapping the top page. $2,843,712 due within 30 days. I'll have it served to the Whitmans tomorrow. Perfect, I said. She looked at me over her glasses. Frank, you're dismantling their entire world. They built it on borrowed money. I'm just repossessing the foundation. Even Ethan's? She asked quietly. I hesitated. Especially Ethan's. Nora sighed. I hope this gives you peace. It won't, I said. But it'll give me balance. The next day, news started spreading faster than I'd expected. Whitman Motors suspends operations amid financial investigation. Beverly Hills couple faces multi-million-dollar lawsuit over unpaid loan. The articles were polite factual. But the undercurrent was clear. They were finished. Marcus called that afternoon. The fallout's begun. Their accounts are frozen, suppliers are pulling out. You've officially broken them. Not me, I said. Their choices. He chuckled softly. You're unbelievable. Unbelievable keeps me alive, I said. By the weekend, Ethan called. The message went to voicemail, but I played it later. Dad, please call me back. Everything's falling apart. The bank pulled our line, clients are leaving. I don't know how to fix this. His voice cracked near the end, and I paused the message halfway through. I'd spent years imagining what remorse from my son might sound like. It wasn't satisfying. It just made the silence after worse. Monday morning, I walked into First National Bank. The senior vice president, James Morrison, rose when he saw me. Mr. Hayes, he said warmly. Haven't seen you in a while. Too long, I replied. We sat in his private office, heavy with oak and quiet. I slid a folder toward him. I'd like to withdraw as guarantor on the Hayes Consulting line of credit. He frowned, flipping through the documents. That's unusual. It's a substantial facility. $750,000, I said. You'll find everything in order. Without your backing, they'll lose access to funds. I'm aware. He studied me. This isn't a casual decision, is it? Nothing I do ever is. He nodded slowly, pressing a button on his desk. I'll start the process. Once finalized, it can't be reversed without a full reapplication. I know, I said. When I left his office, the air outside felt clearer, thinner. Like I'd just taken a deep breath after years of holding it. 2 days later, I met Marcus again. He looked almost exhilarated. It's done. Hayes Consulting's accounts are collapsing. The Whitmans' properties are under lien. You've just erased 3 fortunes with less emotion than most people use ordering lunch. I smiled faintly. That's because I never gamble. Marcus leaned forward. Frank, can I ask you something personal? Go ahead. Why now? You could have done this years ago. Because I said until they humiliated me, I still believed they respected me. He nodded slowly. And now? Now, I said, they remember who taught them how to survive. That evening, I returned home. The sky was blood red over the mountains, the kind of sunset that felt almost biblical. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat at my desk. On the top of the stack was a newspaper headline, clipped neatly. Whitman Group files for bankruptcy protection. I traced the words with my thumb. For a long time, I didn't move. The house was so still I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway, each second louder than the last. My phone vibrated. A message from Nora. Congratulations, Frank. It's over. But it wasn't. Winning didn't feel like triumph. It felt like quiet. Empty. Necessary. I stared at Elaine's photo on the bookshelf, her smile caught mid-laughter, frozen forever in that summer light. "It's done," I whispered. The silence answered soft and endless. Outside, the wind carried dust across the desert, reshaping the dunes like time erasing footprints. I lifted my glass. "To precision," I said, and drank. For years they'd called me irrelevant, weak, finished. Now with a single stroke of pen and number, I'd reminded them exactly what kind of man I was. The kind of man who didn't raise his voice, only the stakes. The first sign of collapse came quietly. No sirens, no headlines at first, just an email from Marcus at dawn. Subject, "It's starting. Body Bank has officially frozen Whitman Group accounts. Their payroll bounced this morning." I set the phone down beside my coffee cup and watched the steam twist into the cold desert air. Across the street, my neighbor was watering the same cactus he watered every morning, unaware that a dynasty was crumbling a few miles away. The sky was soft gray, the kind that turns gold without warning. By the time the sun broke through, I knew every news outlet in Palm Springs would be awake. At 9 it began. The alerts came one after another. Whitman Group under financial investigation. Car dealership empire faces bankruptcy. Sources internal mismanagement to blame. I turned on the television. Margaret and Richard Whitman's faces flashed across the screen. Stiff smiles, tight shoulders, that unmistakable look of people who still thought they could bluff their way out of ruin. Reporters hovered outside their Beverly Hills home. The voiceover was merciless. After years of lavish spending and mounting debts, the Whitmans face a multi-million-dollar repayment demand. The phone rang again. "Nora, you've made every banker in town double-check their loan agreements," she said. "They'll be studying your playbook for years." I smiled faintly. "You make it sound like a game. You and I both know this isn't a game. It's justice, just colder." By noon, the collapse had become public theater. Whitman Motors shuttered its flagship showroom, temporarily closed for restructuring. Employees stood outside smoking trading gossip about unpaid wages. Glow House Interiors, Sabrina's boutique, posted a note on social media, taking a short hiatus to focus on family. Within minutes, local forums were full of speculation. I scrolled past the comments slowly. Typical rich folks spending beyond their means. Isn't that the family that humiliated the old guy at his retirement? Looks like karma caught up. Karma didn't catch up. I drove it there. I set the phone down and stared at the empty living room. The satisfaction I'd expected never came. The victory was quiet, almost clinical. I didn't want their destruction. Not really, I wanted acknowledgement. But acknowledgement wasn't something people like the Whitmans gave. They only understood loss. Nora came by that afternoon, folder in hand, her sunglasses still on. "You might want to see this," she said, dropping the file onto my coffee table. Inside were fresh reports, accounts, foreclosed properties, listed for auction, personal vehicles repossessed. "You've dismantled an empire, Frank." I nodded. "And yet, I don't feel taller." She studied me, then sighed. "You've spent your life keeping score. Now that the ledger's balanced, you don't know what to do with the silence." "Silence I can handle," I said. "It's the echo that bothers me." That evening, the phone rang again. "Ethan." I let it ring once, twice, then pressed play on the voicemail. "Dad, please. Everything's gone. The bank froze our accounts. Sabrina's losing it. Her parents won't talk to us. They're blaming me. I don't even know where to start. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry." The line went dead. I replayed it once, maybe twice, before deleting it. I'd waited 30 years for my son to say those words. They didn't sound the way I'd imagined. The next morning, Marcus sent another report. "They're filing for bankruptcy today. Public hearing scheduled next week. You've officially won." Won. The word sat heavy on my chest. What exactly had I won? A pile of numbers, maybe. A headline or two. the satisfaction of being right. But as I looked around my quiet house, the same faded photos on the mantel, the same cup rings on the desk, I realized victory doesn't fill silence. It just amplifies it. I drove to the old diner Elaine and I used to go to on Sundays. The same waitress was there, older now, hair more gray than blonde. She smiled. "Haven't seen you in years, Mr. Hayes. You want your usual?" "Sure," I said. When she walked away, I looked out the window. Across the street, a young father was helping his son fix a bicycle chain. The boy was laughing grease on his fingers, sunlight in his hair. For a moment, I saw Ethan there, age 8, grinning with that same wide, unguarded joy. I used to think success meant never letting your children feel small. I gave him everything: education, opportunity, security. But maybe the one thing I should have given him was failure. At 4, Nora called again. "Richard and Margaret want to meet. They're begging for a payment plan. Tell them they had one," I said. They ignored it. "You could forgive the interest," she said quietly. "I could," I said. "But they didn't forgive the insult." Her voice softened. "This isn't about them anymore, Frank. It's about you." "Maybe," I said, "but I've spent too long being everyone else's stepping stone. I'd rather be the reminder they trip over." She sighed. "You sound like a man who just won a war and realized the battlefield was his own house." I didn't answer. That night I poured myself a drink and turned off every light except the one above my desk. The documents from Marcus were still open: spreadsheets, balance sheets, charts of collapse. The numbers glowed on the screen like tiny ghosts. Outside, the desert wind picked up whispering through the palms. Somewhere far off, thunder rolled. I took another sip and stared at the old photo of Elaine. "You'd tell me to stop," I murmured. "To forgive. To rest." The photo, of course, said nothing. I leaned back in my chair. "They think I'm finished now," I said aloud. "But this isn't the end. This is what clarity looks like." The following day, a reporter from the Desert Ledger called. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "I'm writing a piece about the Whitman bankruptcy. I'd love to include your perspective." "My perspective," I repeated. "Yes. You were a major creditor. People say you exposed the whole operation." I considered it for a moment, then said, "My perspective is simple. The numbers always tell the truth. It just takes the world a while to catch up." She laughed softly. "That's quite a quote, Mr. Hayes. Keep it," I said, and hung up. By Friday, the bankruptcy filing was official. Every news outlet ran the story. Margaret's statement to the press was a masterpiece of denial, temporary restructuring, unfortunate timing, unforeseen losses. She didn't mention my name once, but she didn't have to. Everyone knew. That evening, as the sun set, I sat on the porch listening to the faint hum of the city far below. For years I'd been the man they dismissed, the old accountant, the relic. Now their world was dust, and I was still standing. The desert was quiet. Too quiet. I finished my drink, staring at the last sliver of light on the horizon. "You see, Elaine?" I whispered. I didn't need to shout. I just had to remember the math. The stars came out slowly, one by one, steady and unbending. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of victory settle over me, like dusk, soft, heavy, and lonelier than I'd expected. The world now knew the truth. And in the silence that followed, I realized that sometimes justice doesn't roar. It just stops pretending to sleep. The phone rang again that night, long after midnight. I didn't move. The screen glowed from the coffee table. Ethan Hayes. The sound echoed through the empty living room, bouncing off walls that had forgotten laughter. On the 5th ring, I silenced it. The voicemail pinged seconds later, his voice breaking through the stillness. "Dad, please, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I don't know what to do anymore. We lost the house. Sabrina's parents are gone, moved out of state. She barely talks. I messed up. I know that now. Just call me back." The message ended, leaving only the ticking of the old clock. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. That sound, my son's voice stripped of pride, should have felt like vindication. It didn't. It felt like history repeating itself. When Elaine died, Ethan had cried the same way, choking on words he couldn't fix. That night, I promised him I'd never let the world break him again. And now, I'd become the one who did. The ice in my glass had melted, leaving the bourbon weak. I set it aside and stood walking to the window. The desert was quiet, the moon casting faint silver lines across the sand. Somewhere out there, my son was sitting in a dark apartment, probably staring at a phone just like me, waiting for something that wouldn't come. I closed my eyes and whispered, "You wanted to stand on your own, Ethan. Now you can." But the words rang hollow. The next morning I woke early and made coffee out of habit. The smell filled the kitchen, rich and grounding, but the taste was ash in my mouth. On the counter sat the folded newspaper. The headline that had given me satisfaction a week ago now felt heavy. Whitman Group bankrupt. Assets liquidated. I traced the letters absently. Victories looked different in the light of day. At 9, I called Nora. "You didn't answer last night," she said. "I figured you were celebrating." I wasn't. "Ethan reached out, didn't he?" I didn't answer. "You're human, Frank," she said gently. "It's allowed to hurt. I gave him everything I said. He just kept taking, and now you've taken back everything. Does it feel like peace yet?" I looked around the quiet house, the ticking clock, the dust motes spinning in the sunlight, the faint hum of the refrigerator. "No," I said. "It feels like proof." Nora sighed. "Proof of what? That I was right?" She paused. "Being right doesn't keep you company." Her words hung in the air long after we hung up. That afternoon, I drove into town. The road shimmered under the heat mirage dancing along the asphalt. I didn't know where I was going until I found myself parked outside Hayes Consulting, or what was left of it. The sign above the door had been taken down, leaving pale outlines where the letters used to be. Through the window, I could see dust gathering on the desks. I remembered the day he'd opened it. Ethan had been so proud. "You'll see, Dad. I'll make you proud." I had smiled, pretended not to notice the shaky business plan, the borrowed money, the arrogance that comes from never having been hungry. Now, all that remained was silence and the faint reflection of an old man in the glass. When I got home, I poured another drink, but didn't touch it. Instead, I sat at my desk, flipping through old photographs. Elaine in the garden, her hands covered in soil. Ethan at age 10, holding a baseball glove, too big for him. Us three one summer at the lake, her hair caught by the wind, his grin missing 2 front teeth. I had built an empire to protect those smiles. And in doing so, I'd turned them into currency. The next day, Nora called again. "Coffee," she said. "You sound like you need to see something that isn't paperwork." We met at the Copper Mug, the same cafe we'd been coming to for years. She was already there when I arrived, stirring her drink. "You look exhausted," she said. "I am. You won." "Did I?" She studied me. "You remind me of my husband when he won his last case, walked out of court victorious, and died 6 months later of an ulcer." I smiled faintly. "You always know how to cheer a man up." "I'm serious, Frank. You've been fighting your whole life for status, respect, fairness. But there's no one left to fight. What's next? I haven't thought that far ahead." "Then think." Because revenge is a project with a deadline. After it's done, you still have to live. I stared into my coffee. I used to believe in fairness. Now I just believe in math. Math doesn't keep you warm, she said softly. We sat in silence for a long moment, the sound of other people's lives filling the space, the clink of cups, the low hum of conversation. When I left, she called after me. Frank, maybe it's time to forgive him. Not for him, for you. I didn't turn around. That night, Marcus stopped by. He was younger, sharp suit, full of that hungry energy I used to have. I wanted to drop off the finalized reports, he said, placing a stack of folders on my desk. Keep them, I said. He hesitated. Everything's done, you know. You can relax now. I don't know how I admitted. He smiled faintly. I read about you on Reddit last night. Some guy posted your story, called it "The Accountant Who Outsmarted His Own Family." It's going viral. I laughed quietly. I guess everyone loves a revenge story as long as it isn't theirs. He studied me the way a student studies a teacher who suddenly looks human. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Do you ever regret being this ruthless? I thought about it. No. But I regret that it was necessary. He nodded, understanding. You taught me something, Mr. Hayes. What's that? That success without mercy leaves you rich and cold. I'd rather be broke and warm. He left the folders on the desk and shook my hand before leaving. His words lingered long after the door closed. That night I poured another drink and sat by the window. The desert was silent, except for the faint rustle of wind through the palms. On the table lay Marcus's words scribbled on a sticky note he'd left behind. Mercy is also a currency. I stared at it until the ink blurred. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to remember my father, hard man, sharp voice, always preaching that forgiveness was for fools. Real men, he'd say, don't let anyone get away with disrespect. I had lived my whole life trying not to be him, and somehow I'd become exactly that. I looked toward the bookshelf where Elaine's photo sat. You were the soft heart in this house, I whispered. I think I lost mine when you left. The silence answered. I picked up my phone, scrolled to Ethan's name. My thumb hovered over call, then shifted to message. Let's talk when you're ready. I hit send before I could stop myself. The message delivered. No reply. I turned off the light and sat in the dark, the desert wind pressing gently against the windows. Revenge had given me justice. Maybe forgiveness could give me something else. Something I hadn't felt in years. Not victory, not power, peace. Rain had not touched Palm Springs in months yet. That morning the sky was gray, swollen with clouds, heavy enough to bruise the horizon. I was reading the business section when the knock came. A sound sharp enough to slice through the quiet. When I opened the door, Ethan stood there, soaked from the waist down, hair plastered to his forehead. Dad? He said, his voice low. It's Sabrina. She's in the hospital. They said she could deliver any time now. For a moment I couldn't speak. The only sound was the soft drip of water from his jacket onto the porch. Is she all right? She's scared, he said. She keeps asking for you. I grabbed my coat without another word. The drive to Desert Memorial took 40 minutes. Neither of us spoke. Rain hit the windshield in uneven rhythms, and the wipers kept time like a metronome to thoughts neither of us could voice. When we pulled into the hospital lot, Ethan turned off the engine but didn't move. She doesn't know what to say to you, he murmured. Neither do I. Then don't, I said, and stepped out. Inside, the hospital lights were too bright, the hallways humming with that sterile hum of machines doing the work of mercy. A nurse led us down a corridor where the smell of antiseptic clung to everything. Sabrina lay in a narrow bed, her face pale but peaceful, a monitor beeping softly beside her. When she saw me, her eyes widened. Mr. Hayes, she whispered, then winced. It's Franklin, I said quietly, stepping closer. And I'm not here for apologies. She gave a weak smile. Good, because I've run out of words that make sense. Ethan stood at the foot of the bed, hands twisting together. She's early, he said, his voice brittle. The nurse returned, checked the monitor, nodded. Not much longer, she said before leaving. For a long time, no one spoke. The rain outside softened to a whisper against the windows. I could hear Sabrina's breathing, shallow and rhythmic. I'd never stood this close to her without feeling the weight of resentment. Now she looked small, human, frightened. She turned her head toward me. I don't know if you can ever forgive me, she said softly, but I wanted you to see her when she comes. I wanted her to know you're part of her life. I swallowed hard. Let's just focus on bringing her here safely, I said. Her lips trembled into a smile. That's fair. An hour later, a nurse appeared again, smiling. It's time. Ethan squeezed Sabrina's hand as they wheeled her away. I stayed back watching as the doors closed behind them. The sound of rain filled the waiting room again, steady, relentless. Minutes turned to hours. The coffee in the paper cup cooled beside me. I thought about the first time I'd waited like this, the day Ethan was born. Elaine had insisted on classical music playing in the delivery room. She said it would make him calm. He came out screaming anyway. A nurse finally appeared, face glowing with the satisfaction of someone who delivers miracles for a living. Congratulations, she said. You have a granddaughter. My breath caught. Are they all right? They're perfect, she smiled. Would you like to see her? The nursery was a quiet miracle. Rows of bassinets lined the walls, each holding a new beginning wrapped in soft colors. The nurse led me to one near the center. She's small but strong, she said. 10 fingers, 10 toes. The baby's tiny face was peaceful, her chest rising and falling with steady breaths. I leaned closer. She's beautiful, I whispered. Would you like to hold her? The nurse asked. I hesitated, then nodded. The bundle was lighter than I expected, warm and impossibly fragile. She stirred, blinked once, and gripped my finger with a strength that startled me. That single touch undid something in me I didn't realize was still locked. Her skin smelled faintly of milk and clean linen. My throat tightened. You have no idea who I am yet, I murmured. And maybe that's for the best. The nurse smiled and slipped quietly away, leaving me alone with her. I looked down at the child, the future my pride had nearly erased. Your mother was cruel to me, I said softly, and your father forgot who I was. But none of that matters now. You're the proof that the world can start fresh, even from wreckage. Ethan appeared in the doorway, red-eyed, smiling like a man who'd just stepped out of a storm. Dad, he whispered. You're holding her before I even did. I looked up at him. You were busy doing the hard part. He came closer, watching me with that same look he used to give me as a boy when I fixed something he'd broken. Her name's Emma, he said. Sabrina picked it. Emma, I repeated the name, tasting simple and right. He hesitated, voice shaking. Dad, I'm sorry for everything. I wanted to make you proud, and I ended up... You did, I said. Just not the way you thought. He blinked hard. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Then earn it, I said quietly, handing him his daughter. He took the baby gently, holding her close. I don't know where to start. Start here, I said. Hold on, and don't let go this time. Sabrina woke later that evening. When I stepped into her room, she was watching Emma sleep beside her in the bassinet. Her eyes met mine, wary, but softer than before. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. Not the kind people give to make themselves feel better. The real kind, the one that admits I was wrong. You were, I said. She nodded. I was jealous of you. You had everything I thought mattered: respect, stability, control. I thought tearing you down would make me feel bigger. She wiped her eyes. It didn't. I pulled a chair closer to the bed. If you mean what you say, then start proving it. I will, she whispered. For a long time we sat in silence, the only sound the soft breathing of the child beside us. She has your eyes, I said finally. Sabrina smiled faintly. Then she'll see the world clearly. When I left the hospital that night, the rain had stopped. The parking lot gleamed under the streetlights, every puddle catching a piece of the sky. Ethan walked me to my car. Thank you for coming, he said. I didn't think you would. I didn't either, I admitted. But some things matter more than pride. He nodded, then took a breath. We'll make this right, Dad. Sabrina and I. Somehow. Do that, I said, but don't do it for me. Do it for her. He smiled, tired but genuine. Will you come by tomorrow? She wants you to hold Emma again. I hesitated, then nodded. Tomorrow, when I started the engine, he leaned down by the window. Dad? Yes, I'm proud of you. I looked at him for a long moment. You finally said something I can believe. He laughed softly, eyes wet. As I drove away, the clouds parted, revealing a thin sliver of moon. The air smelled new, rinsed clean. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the weight of anger pressing on my chest. Back home, I sat in my chair by the window, looking out at the quiet desert. The house didn't feel as empty tonight. Somewhere down the road, a child was sleeping, and for once the future didn't look like a ledger to be balanced. It looked like a story still being written. I whispered her name once, letting it linger. Emma. A life beginning exactly where mine had nearly ended. The call came 3 weeks later, just after sunrise. I was sitting on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the desert blush pink with morning light when Ethan's name flashed across my phone. Dad, he said, breathless, the sound of wind and traffic behind him. I need your help. It's about the house. I frowned. I thought you sold it. We tried. But there's a lien from the Whitman bankruptcy. The lawyers say it's tied to the unpaid taxes from the dealerships. I don't even understand how that's possible. It's possible because you built your life on their credit, I said quietly. And when they fell, you fell with them. I know. I can't fix this alone. His voice cracked on the last word. For the first time in months, he sounded like the boy who used to come running to me after scraping his knees, expecting the world to make sense again once I put a bandage on it. Where are you now? I asked. Outside City Hall. They said if we can't resolve it by Friday, the property goes to auction. I looked at the cup cooling in my hand. Meet me at my office in 2 hours. The office sat on the 15th floor of a glass tower downtown, overlooking the city that had once belonged to other people's ambitions. My name Hayes Financial Group, was etched across the frosted door in clean silver letters. It still startled me sometimes to see it. When Ethan arrived, he hesitated in the doorway as if stepping into sacred ground. His clothes were wrinkled hair, unkempt, the sleeplessness of new parenthood written all over his face. Nice place, he said, trying for humor, but landing somewhere closer to shame. It's quiet, I said. Sit down. He obeyed, glancing around at the floor-to-ceiling windows, the framed certificates, the minimalist desk, where every pen had its place. You really built all this. I built it a long time ago, I said. I just stopped hiding it. He exhaled. I should have asked you for help months ago. You should have respected me years ago, I corrected. But my tone was softer than before. Now tell me everything. He handed me a thick envelope, legal notices, foreclosure warnings, bank correspondence. I read each one carefully, the language familiar, cold. This isn't just about the house, I said finally. This is about inheritance. The Whitmans used your property as collateral on one of their final loans. When they declared bankruptcy, their creditors went after anything linked to them, including you. His shoulders slumped. So we're finished. Not if we move fast. He looked up. You'd really help me, Ethan, I said, leaning back in my chair. You're my son. That never stopped being true, even when I stopped liking you. He gave a shaky laugh. That's fair. For the next hour, I made calls to the bank, to the bankruptcy trustee, to a lawyer I'd worked with years ago who still owed me a favor. I slipped back into that mode I hadn't felt since my early accounting days, sharp, efficient, surgical. Numbers became a language I could still control, even when emotions slipped through my fingers. By noon, I had a plan. You'll transfer temporary ownership of the property to me, I explained. I'll clear the liens using funds from a private account. Once the debts are settled, the title returns to your name. That sounds like... He hesitated. Like another favor I don't deserve. It's not a favor, I said. It's a correction. You'll repay every cent when you're able. He nodded slowly. I will. You'll also sign this. I slid a document across the desk. He read the heading aloud. Limited power of attorney. I'll manage your financial restructuring for the next 6 months. No more risky loans, no impulsive expansions. You'll focus on your wife, your daughter, and your work. He hesitated, then signed. As the pen touched the paper, I realized this was the first time we'd truly worked together as equals. Not father saving son, but 2 men facing consequence and rebuilding something honest from it. That afternoon, I accompanied him to the county records office. The clerk, a tired woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, recognized my name on the paperwork. Frank Hayes, she said. The one who broke the Whitman case. I gave a faint smile. I prefer to think of it as balancing the books. She chuckled. Well, looks like you're fixing another one today. Ethan watched her stamp the documents, each thud echoing through the small office. When it was done, he turned to me. It's strange, he said quietly. All my life I thought money made us powerful. But now that it's gone, I feel lighter. That's because you're finally standing on ground that's yours, I said. He nodded, eyes glistening. Thank you, Dad. We stopped by the hospital afterward. Sabrina was sitting up in bed, baby Emma cradled in her arms. Her face lit up when she saw Ethan walk in holding the paperwork. It's done, he smiled. We keep the house. She turned to me, emotion softening her voice. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. It's Franklin, I said again. And you're welcome. Emma stirred tiny hands stretching toward the light filtering through the window. I reached out instinctively, letting her fingers wrap around mine again. That same grip, small but unyielding, tightened something in my chest. She recognizes you, Sabrina said. I doubt that, I said. But I recognize her. Ethan looked at me. Would you like to hold her? I hesitated, then nodded. She fit perfectly in the crook of my arm, her warmth sinking into me. Her breathing was steady, her tiny lips curled in a half-smile that reminded me of Elaine. She's got your mother's mouth, I said quietly. Ethan smiled. Mom would have loved her. She would have loved the second chance, I said. That evening back at home, I poured myself a small drink, but didn't touch it. I sat by the window, the sunset stretching over the mountains in bands of orange and violet. The desert, once so empty, felt alive again. On the table beside me lay a new photograph, Ethan, Sabrina, and Emma, at the hospital, all 3 smiling. The picture had been taken earlier that day by a nurse, and when she'd handed it to me, I'd almost refused. But something about the way Emma looked toward the camera, as if already aware of the world's possibilities, made me keep it. For years, I had defined my life through loss. Elaine, respect family. Every victory had felt like a correction, every act of revenge, a balance sheet entry. But looking at that photo, I felt something shift. Maybe this was what real wealth looked like. Not the numbers in the ledger, but the people who came back after you stopped chasing them. The phone buzzed. A message from Ethan: dinner next week. Sabrina's making lasagna. Emma insists you attend. I smiled, typing back, I'll bring dessert. Tell Emma she'll have to share. Outside, the desert wind picked up again, warm and gentle this time, brushing against the house like forgiveness itself. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel like a man defined by what had been taken from him. I felt like a man who'd finally stopped taking. I closed my eyes, whispering into the quiet balance restored. And for once, the silence didn't echo, it answered. 6 months later, the sun rose over the desert, the same way it always did, slow, deliberate, unapologetic. I stood in the glass-walled conference room of my new headquarters, Hayes Financial Group, watching the light creep down the steel skyline. The morning meetings would begin soon, but for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about numbers. I was thinking about Emma. Every Thursday afternoon, Sabrina brought her to my office. She was 8 months old now, curious, loud, and determined to grab every pen in sight. The staff adored her. I pretended not to, but the moment she gurgled, the hard shell I'd built over decades cracked like thin glass. At exactly 10 o'clock, my assistant knocked. "They're here," she said. Ethan stepped in first, carrying Emma against his chest. Sabrina followed, smiling in that quiet, careful way that people do when they're still learning peace. "Good morning, Grandpa," Ethan said, grinning. "She practiced saying your name." Sabrina laughed. "It comes out as Papa, but we're getting there." I reached for Emma, who reached back eagerly, fingers curling around my thumb. "That's close enough," I said. She squealed, grabbing the rim of my glasses with surprising force. Ethan chuckled. "She's strong. Must be the Hayes genes. Let's hope she uses them better than we did," I said. After they left, I walked through the office, nodding to the employees who'd started arriving. Most were young, driven, sharp, and unspoiled by cynicism. I'd chosen them carefully, people who believed numbers could still mean trust, not just leverage. At the far wall hung a framed newspaper clipping, The Bookkeeper Who Became a Legend, How One Man's Revenge Reshaped an Empire. Marcus had sent it to me months ago. I'd kept it not out of pride, but as a reminder. Revenge can build, but it can also blind. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Hayes, your Forbes interview is in 10 minutes. Send them in," I said. A young woman entered, tablet in hand, recorder ready. "Mr. Hayes, thank you for meeting with me. I've been following your story for months. The fall of the Whitmans, your company's rise, your son's recovery. It's practically mythic. Let's hope it ends less tragically than most myths," I said. She smiled. "Our readers want to know one thing. What motivated you to rebuild?" After everything, I looked out the window. The city shimmered beneath the desert haze, because destruction without renewal is just bitterness. I wanted my story to end with growth, not ashes. She nodded, tapping notes. "And your family, have they forgiven you for the methods you used?" I smiled faintly. Forgiveness isn't a transaction. It's an investment. You give it time and honesty, and sometimes it yields returns you never expected. "Beautifully put," she said. "Last question. If you could speak to your younger self, the man before all this, what would you say?" I thought for a long moment. Don't confuse being underestimated with being unloved. Sometimes people fail you because they're weak, not cruel. Learn the difference early. It'll save you decades. She switched off the recorder. "That's powerful, Mr. Hayes. Thank you." After she left, I sat at my desk, staring at the skyline again. The desert stretched endless and golden beyond the glass. A reminder that life, like sand, always shifts, no matter how firm you think your footing is. That evening, I drove out to the house Ethan and Sabrina had managed to save, the same one I'd once thought would symbolize their greed. Now it looked humble, lived in. Wind chimes hung on the porch, and the faint smell of rosemary drifted from the kitchen window. Sabrina opened the door apron, dusted with flour. "You're early," she said with a smile. "Ethan's finishing up the lasagna." Then, "I'm right on time," I said, stepping in. The dining table was set with quiet care, simple plates, candles, a baby seat at the end. Emma squealed when she saw me, slapping her hands against the tray. "Papa!" she yelled triumphantly. I froze. Did she just... Ethan laughed. Her first word that isn't milk or no. "Congratulations, Dad. You've been promoted." Sabrina wiped a tear, laughing. "I told you she'd do it before dinner." I lifted Emma into my arms, her laughter spilling against my chest like music I didn't know I'd been waiting for. "You have excellent timing, young lady," I said softly. Ethan placed the lasagna on the table. "Let's eat before she demands another performance." Dinner was loud, messy, and perfect. We talked about work, about Emma's first attempts to crawl, about Sabrina's plan to reopen her boutique on a smaller scale this time, without loans or illusions. When dessert came, chocolate cake I'd bought from the same bakery Elaine used to love. Sabrina leaned back, smiling. "You know, I never thought we'd all sit here again, not like this." "Neither did I admitted. "But the math works out finally." Ethan chuckled. "You still talk like an accountant. Some habits are good ones," I said. He grew quiet, studying me. "Dad, I meant what I said before. I'm proud of you. Not just for the company, but for forgiving us." "I didn't forgive you," I said. "I forgave myself for expecting you to be me." He nodded, eyes wet. "That might be the kindest thing you've ever said." "I'm still working on kind," I said. Sabrina laughed. "Well, whatever this is, I'll take it." Later after dinner, I stood outside on the porch while Ethan put Emma to bed. The night air was cool, the desert stretching out in silver blue shadows. Sabrina joined me, arms folded. "She really loves you," she said softly. "You're her favorite person." "Impossible," I said. "She hasn't met the world yet." "She doesn't have to," she said. "You're enough." I looked at her, this woman who had once stood in a glittering ballroom and called me pathetic, and saw not arrogance, but gratitude. The years had stripped away the gold-plated pride, leaving something genuine beneath. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for not giving up on him." She smiled. "He gets that from you, you know." When I drove home, the stars were out, thousands of them, cold and brilliant above the desert. I parked the car and walked inside the house, no longer feeling like a fortress, but something closer to peace. On my desk sat an old photo, Elaine holding baby Ethan. I placed a new one beside it, Ethan, Sabrina, and Emma at the dinner table, caught mid-laughter. Past and present side by side. The symmetry made me smile. I poured a final glass of wine and sat by the window. The city lights shimmered in the distance. For once, I wasn't counting days' debts or regrets. I was simply still. Somewhere in that quiet, I thought of Elaine's voice again. "Don't let numbers replace people, Frank." I finally learned, I whispered. Then, for the first time since this story began, I let go. If you've stayed with me until now, tell me something. What would you have done in my place? Would you have chosen revenge or forgiveness? Leave your thoughts below. I read every one of them. And if you believe in second chances, in family, in redemption found through pain, then subscribe and stay. There are more stories like this one, and they'll remind you that no matter how broken we become, it's never too late to rebuild. Because sometimes balance isn't about numbers. It's about love finding its way back home.